So now, after playing Toxic Commando for about like 10 to 15 hours, I can finally give my final verdict on the game of what I think of it. Obviously, this is not going to be the end of me playing this game. I'm going to play this game a lot more. Honestly, I enjoyed it a ton. And down the line, this game is going to have a bunch of new content and new releases. They kind of put out a new roadmap of everything what this game has to offer. But I kind of want to give my final thoughts of this game because I did do a video about a couple weeks ago going over the demo of it and just kind of recommending if you're interested in this game of any sort, you got to try out the demo, and then from there, kind of if you like the demo, maybe look into buying the game. So if you still haven't pulled the trigger and you want to take a look at this game, I'm gonna get my final thoughts here. So obviously, in the name of this game, you have the name John Carpenter's Toxic Commando. I don't know if he has any sort of involvement into this game. I think I've heard something about how he's made some sort of involvement to the music of it and the scoring of the game. But quite honestly, there's nothing that I've seen so far that really reminds me of John Carpenter. But that he's put his hands on it. But obviously, this game has a lot of like 1980s horror, dark comedy esque feel to it. And look, I mean, so far it kind of reminds me of his movies, but I've only watched a couple of them, so take that with a grain of salt. I'm not a massive John Carpenter fan, not for any specific reason or anything, but I just haven't come across watching a ton of his movies. So if you are a fan of him and kind of like that general feel of that 1980s like horror esque, this game does kind of portray that a little bit. Also, to briefly speak about Saber Interactive too, they're also in the works of the new Turok game, as well as now most recently announced a John Wick game. So this is a development team that's really starting to crank out a lot of new content and new games of a bunch of different I guess IPs that are out there. So one of the big selling points of this game is the Swarm engine. So if you've played World War Z or Space Marine 2 at all, the Swarm engine is basically this proprietary thing that Saber Interactive has made that kind of does this whole massive swarm of enemies towards you. I don't know how they're able to do it without necessarily bogging down your system at all, because quite honestly, I think this game, as well as all their previous games, run pretty well, and they do a great job of getting that sense of just like overwhelmingness of how big these hordes are, and seeing hundreds of zombies or hundreds of enemies on the screen at once. Like I said, I love the Swarm engine. It's unlike anything else that's out there right now in the co-op like horde space. They do it the best, quite honestly. Like there's no one else that can provide that sort of scale that we've seen out of these Saber Interactive games. So to talk a little bit about the gunplay, I think the FPS gameplay feels really good in this game, which I think is necessary for a game like this where it requires a lot of like fast reaction time with the amount of enemies that are going to be on the screen at once. It feels really good. I think the guns feel really satisfying. The audio feels nice and punchy. The guns feel strong. Like I really enjoy a game that does a really good job of making you feel like you're doing damage, and this game does a really good job of that so far. From what we've seen from the weapon customization that I've kind of gone through, I think it's pretty solid too. There's a lot of variety of different attachments that it offers, and it really adds to the element of what you can do and how you can kind of change up your play style each gameplay. The visual style reminds me a lot of Back for Blood, but more detailed in a much bigger world. Quite honestly, this game is, if I had to put it all together, it's a mash of World War Z that meets like Call of Duty Outbreak with Killing Floor, Left 4 Dead, and then has the same driving mechanics as Mud Runner, which quite honestly, this may be the direction you want to take with this game, to start saying like, hey, what are all these elements that all these other games are doing well, and like how can we improve the genre and push it forward? Because for a long time that the genre has felt pretty stale, and a lot of them have felt kind of copycats. This is the first one to me where it truly feels to have its own identity in that sense. Now, I did mention Mud Runner. So Mud Runner is a game that Saber Interactive also makes. I believe Saber Interactive has about 13 studios, so that explains the amount of content that they're able to push out in terms of new video games and whatnot. But basically, Mud Runner is a off-roading simulator type of game, adventure game, and they kind of take a lot of those same physics and mechanics in the vehicles and bring them over to this game, which is really, really cool. And it makes vehicles a central loop to the game, because they're not just for travels. You can use the car to also, like, the car has a winch on it, so you can do it to like open up cars or open up crates or um, shipping containers and things like that, and for loot, which I think is a really good twist on it. I also like too that the vehicles have more of a realistic feel because of this. So because the maps are overrun, and obviously you're in this post-apocalyptic world, you're not going to have these beautiful pristine roads or be able to drive through them super smooth like you see in, like, let's say like a Call of Duty Outbreak, for example. This actually feels like you're driving in mud, so it has a little bit more of a heavier, slower feel to it, but it also is not so realistic to where it's annoying and stuck. Usually, the only times you get stuck is you have to get out of the car because one of the overgrown branches that they're part of like this virus comes over your wheel, so you have to like shoot those off your wheels to get free. It kind of adds a new like element to the game that you just don't really get in these type of four shooters, and I like this aspect to it. It kind of makes it, I don't want to say more real, I guess it does make it more realistic if you want to say zombie stuff is realistic, but it adds that extra element to it than just shooting. And the car doesn't just drive too. Like you have to give it gas, you have to give it ammo for the turret, you have to repair it. You'll see these spare parts scattered on the map. And there's you can pick up different things to like upgrade your defenses on the mission or on the truck, or upgrade the turrets or whatever you might need to like basically make the car a little bit better. And you're gonna want to try these upgrades throughout this little open zone world to kind of help beef up, because at the end of every mission there's going to be kind of like a final hold, like a final boss type thing. And speaking of the world, basically the general gist of how this game is set up is that kind of like if you're familiar with Call of Duty Outbreak in Cold War, you have like this, I don't want to say a full open world map. It's kind of like a big open zone, I guess, kind of quasi open world. That's just open. Like there's just everything's there, everything's available. But scattered throughout it, there's little like side missions you can do to gain abilities, or you can gain like specific spare parts, like I mentioned, new weapons, ammo, crates, grenades. Just you can kind of go and just scavenge the world and complete these certain missions to help kind of level up your character throughout that specific run or your vehicle. Another thing that really stands out to me about this game is the different mission varieties. So each map has its own unique mission types, which is really cool. And there's also a really big need to rely on your teammates to kind of get through these missions, which I really enjoy in a lot of co-op shooters, because one of the co-op shooters that I don't like is when everybody can kind of run off, do their own thing, and just come back. Versus this is pretty crucial to a lot of the certain like challenges you have to do, or the specific side missions you have to do require everybody to be there. For example, there's one where there's a circle around the vehicle, so everybody has to stay around the vehicle. No one's going to drive off and leave you behind, because then that can affect you, because quite honestly, you don't want to be down a man in a lot of these scenarios, because you're going to want to have as much firepower as possible. And that's a good advantage of the Swarm engine, is that it kind of forces people to be together because of how intense those situations can be. And like I said, like each one of those missions have like their own cool set pieces and their own cool like different mission variety. So each one really feels different. It doesn't all kind of feel the same. And that was something I was a little afraid of when playing the demo, is that I was like, is all of it going to be like this with the final one big holdout? But no, I was actually thoroughly surprised to see that each mission kind of had its own different holdouts. Some of them weren't even holdouts. And then there was the big boss fight. It just had it had a really good variety of like how these missions end, which I was quite honestly really surprised. And also too, just like the side missions, each being very unique on each level, which I also did not expect. I was really, really afraid that a lot of this game was going to be like, okay, you're only going to want to do one run through, but that's it. But having that different mission variety has allowed for a lot more replayability and a lot more replayability that quite honestly I didn't really expect. And I did briefly mention it, but there is challenges, there is mini bosses that you have to complete to progress the mission, because there's not very many mission steps, but you want to kind of go and do all these side content so you can be prepared for that final. And especially as you give up in levels of difficulty, because this game does have multiple different levels of difficulty. There's going to be like normal, hard, and then story mode. But then there's going to be talks of even higher difficulty levels that they're going to release into the future. The maps are also way more in depth and detailed than I would have guessed. Like we found a lot of hidden areas that even require platforming to get to. Like there was one mission, I can't remember the name of it, but it was really cool. You go to basically the very, very corner of the map, and you're kind of going up this mountain. And then to get the loot, you had to literally platform from like one ledge to the next ledge and then climb. That was pretty cool. It's something I haven't necessarily seen in a shooter where it required platforming. It kind of changes the variety of how you play it. And I thought there's clearly a lot of effort and thought into the player experience as you go throughout this game. And also too, I believe that a lot of the missions change their location a lot. So there was parts of the map where I'm like, this is like a whole area of like, clearly was intended to be like a lot of different things. So maybe in higher difficulties. I haven't gone up to the highest, so maybe in those there's going to be more zones of interest. But I also do think that a lot of the areas change as well through each playthrough to make them unique and different, which also adds to the replayability of it. Now, as for the weapon customization, the customization goes deep in the attachment department. It does a lot more than just like leveling up. And one thing I don't like from a lot of games is where it feels like, okay, you're just leveling it up, or there's like certain like random rolls you have to get, or something I didn't necessarily like in Killing Floor 3, where they kind of added abilities to the gun, which this is not really like that. This is almost akin to like a multiplayer game where it's just purely attachments that matter. And then you can level up the tier of those guns and you can go into the match with those specific tiers. But it's only like 4 tiers. The weapon level only goes to 10. But so while it's deep, it's not like too daunting to where you're focused on one gun for too long. You can pretty much like fully level up a gun to level 10 as well as to the highest tier in about like a couple hours, but you're not going to have every attachment. But you can go and move on and go to the different guns because there is a large amount of guns. I mean, there's got to be at least 7 different assault rifles, like 5 different submachine guns. There's a lot of guns you can use. There's like I said, a pretty big variety in weapon customization that I haven't even tried them all out yet. But I'm sure as the game's out, they're going to release even more. Overall, I really recommend this game. I really enjoyed it. It's the first game that I could truly say I'm like, if you like zombie games or you like horde or co-op shooters, I highly, highly recommend getting it. You're going to love the game. If you're interested at all, if this, as everything you've seen and everything I've mentioned, like piques your interest, I really recommend picking it up. I think the price is pretty fair considering the replayability and what it has to offer and the level of quality that it is. Because I haven't run into any like major bugs, no major performance issues. I think the game runs really well. Like I said, it was a pretty good out of the box experience for $30, which you can't beat. I think the game is full price is at 40, but if you own World War Z or Space Marine 2 for a good loyalty discount, they're giving you $10 off. I don't know if it's still the case. I know it was at launch. I would imagine they're going to kind of keep it that way, which like I said, they brought it down to 30, which I think is a pretty cool, amazing perk because I own both games. So I really like that to add a little bit of customer loyalty, and I would like to see maybe more publishers and developers do that where it's like, hey, if you own these games that we previously made, let's cut you a deal. You know, just like you get at like, let's say restaurants, for example. So like I said, I thought that was pretty amazing and pretty cool. And I like to support companies who do cool things like that. Overall, if you enjoyed the video and the review, please be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out, everybody.